Behind these concrete walls lives a man who will never see freedom again. No parole. No forgiveness. No escape. His name is Chris Watts, a father who annihilated his entire family and then calmly went to work as if nothing had happened. But this is not just the story of crime. This is the story of what happens after the headlines fade. What does life look like for a man condemned to die in prison, haunted by what he's done, surrounded by men who know exactly who he is? This is Chris Watts. Life in prison. Before prison numbers replaced his name, Chris Watts was part of what looked like a picture-perfect family. He lived in Frederick, Colorado, with his wife Shannon Watts and their daughters, Bella and Celeste. Shannon was vibrant and outspoken, documenting family life online with relentless optimism. Chris, by contrast, stayed quiet, reserved, compliant, almost invisible. They married in 2012 and built a life that appeared stable from the outside. Shannon was pregnant with their third child, a baby boy named Nico. Friends saw smiles. Social media showed happiness. But behind the curated posts, tension simmered. Financial stress mounted. Emotional distance grew. And Chris began withdrawing. Not with anger, but silence. Those closest to him would later say he never raised his voice. He never argued. He simply disappeared emotionally. That silence became the most dangerous warning sign of all. While his family believed everything was normal, Chris Watts was already living another life. At work, he began an affair with a co-worker, an affair that quickly became an obsession. For the first time, Chris felt desired, unrestricted, free. In private messages, he fantasized about a future without responsibilities, without debt, without children, without Shannon. Psychologists later said this marked a turning point. Chris didn't want a divorce. He wanted a reset, one that erased his past completely. Instead of confronting reality, he chose annihilation. To him, his family was no longer human. There were barriers, and barriers, in his mind, could be removed. In the early hours of August 13th, 2018, the Watts home became a crime scene, though no one knew it yet. Chris would later claim an argument took place. But the evidence tells a colder story. Shannon was strangled in their bedroom while pregnant with their son. Then Chris turned to his daughters. Bella, aware and terrified, fought back. She asked a question that would haunt investigators forever. "Daddy, are you going to do the same thing to me?" Minutes later, he loaded their bodies into his truck. His daughter sat beside their mother's corpse as he drove to an oil site owned by his employer. There, he disposed of them in the most unthinkable way imaginable. Then he washed up, changed clothes, and went to work. By morning, Chris Watts was playing the role of a worried husband. He spoke to police, gave interviews, pleaded for his family's return. But something was wrong. He showed no panic, no urgency, no grief. Body cam footage captured every mistake. His nervous smiles, his constant phone checking, his inability to cry. Investigators knew within hours this was not a disappearance. This was a performance. And soon, the mask would completely fall, leading Chris Watts not just to prison, but to a lifetime inside it. The interrogation room is small, windowless, silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Chris Watts sits alone, hands folded, posture calm. Too calm. Detectives begin gently. They ask about Shannon's friends, her routines, the timeline. Chris answers smoothly, almost rehearsed. He insists his family simply vanished. But every answer raises new questions. Why didn't he panic? Why did he clean the house so thoroughly? Why did his story keep changing? Then comes the polygraph. Chris agrees immediately. Another mistake. The test doesn't just fail him. It exposes him. His breathing spikes. His pulse races. The machine records deception across every critical question. The examiner leans in and says quietly, "Chris, we know you're not telling the truth." That's when the cracks appear. Cornered by evidence, Chris Watts reaches for a partial truth. He tells detectives a story designed to shift blame, one that would later be completely dismantled. He claims Sean and killed the girls. He says he lost control. He says he was in shock. But investigators know this confession is calculated. It minimizes his role. It paints him as a grieving husband who snapped. The room goes quiet. Detectives don't argue. They let him talk. Every lie digs him deeper. Every word exposes inconsistencies. They know the truth is worse than what he's admitting. And they are right. Because this confession isn't the end. It's the beginning of something far darker. Days later, Chris Watts sits down again. This time with no escape left. Surrounded by agents, he finally tells the full story. And what he says horrifies even seasoned investigators. He admits he planned it. He admits he killed Shannon first. He admits his daughters were alive during the drive to the oil site. He describes Bella's fear in chilling detail. How she begged. How she fought. How he ignored her. This time, there is no emotion. No tears. Just facts. When he finishes, the room is silent. One agent later says it felt like listening to someone describe fixing a car, not murdering their children. Chris Watts has now sealed his fate. In November 2018, Chris Watts avoids a trial. Instead, he takes a plea deal. No jury, no defense, no chance of parole. 3 life sentences. 1 for Shannon, 1 for Bella, 1 for Celeste, plus decades more for the death of Nico and tampering with bodies. The courtroom is filled with grief. Shannon's family speaks directly to the man who destroyed their lives. They do not scream. They do not curse. They grieve. Chris says nothing. He is sentenced to die in prison. Prison is a world with its own rules, and Chris Watts enters at the very bottom. Inmates know who he is, what he did, and in prison culture, crimes against children are unforgivable. For his own safety, he is transferred out of Colorado to Dodge Correctional Institution in Wisconsin. Even there, he lives under constant threat. His cell is small. His days are controlled. His name is no longer Chris Watts. It's his inmate number. And this is only the beginning of his punishment. Life in prison is not dramatic. It is repetitive, crushingly slow. And for Chris Watts, every day is exactly the same. He wakes before dawn to the sound of metal doors and shouted counts. Breakfast is eaten quickly under watchful eyes. Movement is controlled. Conversations are limited. Every action, every step is monitored. Chris works a prison job, earns pennies an hour, and returns to a cell barely larger than a bathroom. There are no choices, no privacy, no escape from routine. At night, when the noise fades, the reality settles in. There is nothing left to distract him from what he's done. No family visits. No future plans. Only memory. This is not punishment by violence. It is punishment by time. In prison, every inmate is ranked, not officially but by reputation. And Chris Watts occupies the lowest tier. Crimes against children carry a permanent mark. Other inmates don't forget. They don't forgive. That's why Chris lives under protective measures, separate housing, limited interaction, constant surveillance. Even then, danger is never gone. A look held too long. A whispered name. A note passed between cells. Chris knows this. It's why he keeps his head down. Why he avoids eye contact. Why he speaks softly. Prison doesn't need to punish him physically. The threat is enough. Behind bars, Chris Watts claims he has found God. He attends services, reads scripture, writes about forgiveness and salvation. Some believe it's genuine. Others see it as another form of control, another way to reshape his image. Psychologists note that religion often appeals to inmates who need structure, absolution, and a sense of purpose. But forgiveness in prison is complicated. Faith does not erase facts, and belief does not bring back the dead. To many, Chris's religious transformation feels hollow, not redemption, but retreat. Despite everything, Chris Watts receives mail. Some letters are filled with hate, others with obsession. A disturbing number come from strangers who express sympathy, or worse, admiration. This phenomenon is not new. High-profile killers often attract attention from people drawn to notoriety. But for the families of the victims, every letter feels like another wound. Chris reads them all. Each envelope is a reminder that the world hasn't forgotten, but not in the way he might hope. Chris Watts can escape guards. He can avoid other inmates. But there is one thing he can never escape, his own mind. Psychologists describe him as emotionally detached, conflict avoidant, and incapable of genuine empathy. He compartmentalized his life so completely that murder became, to him, a solution rather than an atrocity. In prison, those mental walls begin to collapse. There are no distractions left, no future to plan, only the past. And the past is loud. Chris Watts says he feels remorse. He has written letters claiming regret. He has spoken about guilt, shame, and sorrow. But the question remains, is it real? Psychologists are divided. Some argue that true remorse requires empathy, something Chris consistently failed to display. Others believe remorse may exist, but too late to matter. What's undeniable is this. Chris expresses sorrow most often when discussing his own suffering, his isolation, his regret for how things turned out. Rarely does he speak spontaneously about his daughter's pain. To critics, this isn't remorse. It's self-pity wearing the mask of regret. Years later, the Chris Watts case still dominates true crime discussions. Podcasts, documentaries, endless comment sections filled with disbelief. Why? Because Chris Watts doesn't look like a monster. He looks ordinary. And that terrifies people. The case forces an uncomfortable truth. Evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it smiles politely and blends in. His life in prison becomes an extension of that fear, a reminder that the threat didn't come from chaos, but from quiet normalcy. Experts have dissected Chris Watts' mind like a crime scene. Emotional repression, avoidance, narcissistic traits, a desperate need to be liked. He didn't rage. He erased. Instead of confronting conflict, he deleted it. Permanently. This makes his case a warning. Not all danger comes with warning signs like anger or violence. Sometimes it comes disguised as passivity. Chris Watts didn't snap. He calculated. While the world debates Chris Watts, the true focus must remain on those he erased. Shanann, Bella, Celeste, Nico. They were not characters in a story. They were lives, lived, loved, and violently stolen. Their names endure through memorials, advocacy, and a public refusal to let them fade into statistics. Chris Watts will grow old behind bars, but his victims will remain frozen in time, forever remembered as they were. A life sentence is not dramatic. It is slow. It is endless. It is watching the world move on without you. Chris Watts will age inside concrete walls. His parents will die. Trends will change. Seasons will pass unnoticed. And one day, his name will fade, except as a warning. Justice didn't bring peace, but it brought permanence. Chris Watts' life is over. His punishment has only begun. Inside prison records, Chris Watts is just another inmate serving life. But outside those walls, his name carries a permanent stain. It appears in textbooks, documentaries, and cautionary conversations about domestic violence and family annihilators. No amount of time will soften what he did. There will be no rehabilitation narrative. No redemption arc. His name will never be separated from the crime. For prison officials, he is a management concern. For the public, he is a warning. For history, he is a case study in how quietly a family can be erased. And that legacy follows him every single day, etched deeper than the bars on his cell. While Chris Watts lives, the families of Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico endure a different sentence: grief without parole. Birthdays pass without candles. Holidays arrive without laughter. What remains are memories, photographs, and an absence that never heals. Shanann's family chose to speak at sentencing not with rage, but with strength. They looked directly at the man who destroyed them and forgave him. Not for his sake, for theirs. That forgiveness did not erase pain. It simply refused to let hate be the final chapter. After every tragedy comes the same question. Were there signs? In hindsight, people point to emotional withdrawal, control issues, financial stress. But hindsight is cruel. In real time, Chris Watts didn't scream danger. He whispered normalcy. This case challenges a dangerous assumption, that monsters are easy to spot. They aren't. Sometimes they're quiet, cooperative, invisible. The lesson is not paranoia. It's awareness. Somewhere in Wisconsin, a light turns off in a prison cell. Chris Watts lies on a narrow bunk, surrounded by concrete and steel. There is no release date, no parole hearing, no countdown to freedom. Only time. Every year that passes is another year the world moves on without him. Another year his children remain gone. Another year he wakes up knowing tomorrow will be exactly the same. This is not mercy. This is permanence. The story of Chris Watts doesn't end with prison walls. It lingers in how we see families, trust appearances, and recognize danger in silence. For lives were taken. One life was condemned to a living death. And the rest of the world was left asking how something so horrific could come from something that looked so ordinary. Remember the victims. Learn the warning signs. And never mistake quiet for harmless. If this story stayed with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Like this video, subscribe, and join us for more true crime stories that must never be forgotten.